Okay, hi everyone. We're going to get started. Welcome. I'm Shuma Ponce with GBCHealth. Welcome to our personal journey session. I want to thank our sponsor for this session, Rabin Martin, and I want to thank our moderator, Nancy Mensch-Tourette, and our wonderful panelists. I'll be very brief. I'm going to now turn it over to Bill Martin from Rabin Martin to make welcoming remarks. Thanks.
Good morning. That's not good enough. Good morning.
Good morning.
Much better. Thank you so much for coming. Actually, people were, I think, debating, I heard in the hallway, which session do I go to, this or the one on maternal health technologies? And I heard really such interesting passion for hearing this particular topic, and I just want to say why I think it raises some passion for me personally. So my name is Bill Martin, and I have the great luxury of the great opportunity to work with a firm that focuses on strategic consulting in public health. And our mission is to try to provide better access to quality care for underserved communities around the world. And my own personal journey started when I was about 18 in college. My first boyfriend was diagnosed after about 12 months of dating with HIV and died actually about 6 months after that. And it was an early lesson in what kind of challenges people face in trying to obtain care. Things have changed a lot since then, but it really early in my life sort of wakened me up to the challenges that many people experience. And throughout my career then I began to learn that that was just one of many, HIV was just one of many, many challenges we all encounter. I love the topic, the moments that guided our path to becoming global health champions, because at our firm, it's actually, I was just telling Barbara, it's an interview question we use. So when people come to interview with us, it's a very common question for to say, what is it that got you started and got you interested in public health? What ignited that passion for you? And if we hear something interesting, then it really makes us sort of cotton to that potential candidate. And if it's just a job, we usually aren't interested. And that passion at the firm has really helped us drive forward against an important mission. And I'm really thankful again to be here today. I want to turn it over to Nancy Tourette, who's going to moderate. Now, I've known Nancy for quite a long time. Nancy is a very comfortable, capable set of hands to help navigate through what is sometimes a very personal journey for people. And so I think I can imagine someone who is better equipped to do that today. She's a veteran of the public relations industry, but I think that undersells her true skills and capabilities. And I'm really glad to see that she has entered a new period of freedom in her own life and career to explore her passions. Nancy?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bill. Well, you know, it's been a long morning of amazing information, and it is my hope, along with the hope of all of my panelists, that will help make this real for you in the session we're having today. Help make it real not only while we're in the room, but thinking about where to go next, not just in terms of career decisions, but in terms of whole life decisions. I'm just delighted and honored to be able to introduce this illustrious group, and it's a very diverse one. So I'm going to ask each one of my panelists to tell us a little bit about themselves directly so we can get a flavor of the diversity of journeys people have had. And then we're going to dive right into an interactive discussion. I'll be asking some questions, but I'm also going to welcome you to ask questions. So I'm going to jump right in by saying hello to Barbara Bush, who is the CEO and co-founder of Global Health Corps, and here representing the future leaders and actually young people who have already become leaders in global public health. Next to her is Bill Rohde, somebody who may be familiar to all of you as the former head of MTV Networks, who played a remarkable job in making HIV/AIDS understood to be everybody's problem, not just the problem of a few people who might be dealing with it. And of course, it has become everybody's problem and everybody's solution, thanks to people like Bill. And Bill is now actually the chair of the corporate advisory board to the GBC. So we're especially lucky to have him on our panel today because he plays a special role in the governance of GBC. And next to Bill is Huma Abbasi, and I'm so thrilled to have her on my panel for the second year in a row because she's an extraordinary woman who set out to be a healthcare professional and now is doing that with a whole other dimension as the head of all of the health and medical programs at Chevron internationally. And last but definitely not least is Gib Bullock. And Gib is somebody who is an entrepreneur. He is at Accenture and had an idea, made the idea come true, and as a result is doing that magic mix of doing good and doing well in a way that's good for careers and for social and public health. So I couldn't be more pleased to introduce all four of these people, and now I'm going to ask, if I may, why don't we start with the lovely lady to my left, Barbara Bush. Tell us about yourself, Barbara.
Absolutely. So about 3.5 years ago, I founded an organization called Global Health Corps. And what we were trying to do is take advantage of the overwhelming interest of young people in global health right now. I'd say Bill is one main reason that that interest started, but we saw because of MTV and the One campaign and other organizations that had really spread the word about global health issues, there was a huge desire to work on these issues amongst young people. And so what we're doing is taking advantage of that. We mobilize, train, and place young leaders from around the world to serve in the field of global health for 1 year within one of our partner organizations like Partners in Health and Clinton Health Access Initiative. I have one of our fellows is sitting in the front table, actually. She is on Mayor Booker's team in Newark, implementing healthcare policy throughout Newark. But anyway, we place our fellows for 1 year of service to learn from the organizations where they work, and then more importantly, we invest heavily in their professional development and their leadership development, and we mentor them and train them on advocacy and policy change so that when they complete this year, it really is a springboard into a career in global health and a career as being a change maker dealing with the huge health issues that exist.
Thanks. Bill, tell us your story. I guess it's somewhat longer.
Longer and more boring, for sure.
I don't think so.
So in true MTV style and short attention span, which I said last night we invented, by the way. I'm here to say it wasn't Twitter. I will keep it short. I was one of the founding members of Global Business Coalition and the first chair way back when. So I have a close attachment to everything you're doing and the fact that you're here. And by the way, the panel is really global. You are the global champions, and we're all just playing our part, I suppose, playing our role. But I've been involved with global health for about 20 years. And I've kept that now that I've left MTV. I don't use the R word. And what I've been doing most recently is I've continued with chairing the Staying Alive Foundation, which is actually has some concentric circles, I think, with Global Health Corps in that we give grants to, we're up to 400 grantees fighting the AIDS epidemic at the grassroots level, which complements very nicely the MTV campaigns at the network level, which reaches billions of people. This does it at the grassroots level, which I think is actually even more effective in some ways and more inspirational. Since then, I've also started working with GAVI, which is a tremendous initiative. It's Bill and Melinda Gates' largest initiative. Vaccines below age 5, creating huge scale in vaccines, therefore reducing the price and having a remarkable positive impact on saving lives below age 5. And then I'm also on the board of AMFAR, which is still looking for a cure. HIV is not over. If we remember the video we just saw of Levi Strauss, HIV is not over. We do not have a cure, but we're making progress. And there is a light at the end of the tunnel. So yeah, I think I'll just end it there, Nancy, and
Thank
go
you,
to Hill's
Bill.
story.
Yeah, well, so for me, it's like, I've been with Chevron for 17 years and, with healthcare for over 20 years. So yes, my age now. And, it's no surprise being a doctor that I'm sitting here and, working in the field of health. But I think my journey, so we, in Chevron, we oversee the design and implementation of health programs for over 60,000 employees. And then you can add up, the dependents and the communities, the people in the communities we work with. But for me, the difference has been, I was always very satisfied when I worked on the front line, as a healthcare professional. But, as an individual, you can only make so much difference. But working in a corporate setting where you have a big company and you have so elaborate programs, you actually have an impact at a very large scale. And that my desire to work with bigger communities and populations brought me to Chevron. Chevron is a company that believes in health, that values health, and we have made a very quick link in between safety and health and productivity. So for us, healthy societies mean good business. And this is why health has a strong business case in Chevron. So my journey, I won't take you through my whole journey. It will become very boring here. But I've worked in several different countries and, developing countries and, in the UK and the US and everywhere. I think, I would like to call myself as a global health champion because I've tried to, expand not just to the employees, but to the bigger communities and work on the needs of the community.
That's a lot. 7 countries. Gib.
Indeed, Gib Bullock. So I've also been 17 years, coincidentally enough, with Accenture. I wish that would mean that my age was the same as yours, but I worked in a couple of different places, first of all. For the first 5 years of working with Accenture, I was doing the normal things that Accenture does. It was strategy consulting, as people do technology and all that kind of classic business stuff. And I guess, giving the very short summary, if there was an epiphany I had, it was actually, it wasn't on the road to Damascus, it was actually on the underground in London. I was based in London at the time and read about a new initiative by an NGO called VSO, who were looking for business skills for development. So I had thought all of this health stuff or development stuff was really for doctors and nurses and teachers and volunteers and good people. I could do that on the weekend, I could do that in my free time, but my job was really maximizing shareholder value, if you will, or getting the bottom line. And I read about this opportunity, and within a year I found myself in Macedonia just after the Kosovo crisis, working as a volunteer, developing small businesses and developing business plans and working on training for women entrepreneurs just after this crisis. And I was on a 90+% salary reduction, never more motivated in my life. It was a drug, it became a drug, and I thought I was going to go back and carry on my career. I came back and had been thinking, how much more can I be getting done if I had a normal team of people? How much more could our company, Accenture, as a massive organization, do beyond giving a few people to do some good causes? Could we actually industrialize this? So a few of us got together and came up with what I now call, it's the not-for-profit group, but I prefer to call it the not-for-loss arm of Accenture because we're a sort of hybrid business unit. And over the last 10 years, we've been trying to pilot, launch, and scale this unit. We're 10 years old now. And while the first few years we were very much around bringing business skills to development, it might be supply chain for antiretrovirals, it might be technology to train nurses using e-learning platforms. Now an exciting point, and we can maybe talk more about this, is at this nexus, this convergence between commercial clients, NGOs, donors, and that's really the innovative stuff. How can we get Coke's expertise in logistics and apply it to the health system of Tanzania? How can we bring Unilevers and Crafts to the challenges of malnutrition? So it's an exciting space, and I just think I've got the best job in the company, so I'm lucky.
It's fantastic, and you all have not only the best jobs in your companies, but ones that you invented and created in many ways. And I want to talk about that a bit. How many people in this room actually set out when you were in your academic training to be healthcare professionals? Actually are doctors, nurses, healthcare. And then add your hands if you studied public health. Okay, so that's about, I would say about half of the people in the room. That means half the people in the room right now are becoming global health champions and aren't people who set out to do that. And I think that's an interesting journey and one that can be daunting for many. I remember in my years working with Edelman, our colleagues who were not in the health practice used to say, well, you can't really do that, right, unless you actually studied it. Well, wrong. So you can study it in your life. So I want to ask that of my colleagues here. And why don't I actually start with Bill, because Bill, you stepped up and did something that was completely outside of the realm of what any company was doing in the days when you got involved at MPV Networks and HIV/AIDS. So how did that happen? Why didn't you write a check and, go to a gala and call it a day?
Well, call it a day. I think for me, personally, it started before MTV, actually, because I was in the LA creative community where AIDS was particularly impactful, tragically. So that's sort of set the seed. But with MTV, it doesn't happen overnight, at least in my experience. It happens over time. And I've always felt, or at least then and still do, that you need to align. You can pick a cause, and there's so many in the world, but it's easier if you align your business with it. So MTV, we found that the majority of new infections of HIV were below age 25, which is the exact same thing as our, the exact same demo as our audience. So for us, there was a business sense. And then I had a mentor, I had many mentors, but one was Dr. Peter Piot, who was heading up this new organization at the UN called UNAIDS. And we bonded. And he came to me and said, would you like to be an ambassador? And, of course, he played to my ego, and I quickly realized it was nothing about me. It was about delivering the network, which at the time was over 1 billion people. So what does that mean? Well, you deliver the network and you create these messages. So we started off with 30-second spots, and we went all the way to 90-minute movies, and now it's seamless into the programming with prevention and stigma, anti-stigma messages, and it's almost undetectable. And our shows who have these messages tend to rate very highly because you want to watch them anyway, yet the messages have an impact on behavioral change. So wow, that was a real epiphany, and that's what MTV does to this day. And I think that all of us, we just pick an issue. And when we started the Global Business Coalition, I had this mantra: doing good is good for business. A lot of businesses don't have the time or money, at least back then. There's been a sea change, of course. So the message was, okay, doing good is good for business. Think of it as your customers. If you're Coca-Cola in Africa, you need to fight the AIDS epidemic, you may have less customers. Do it also for your employees, because your employees are going to feel better about coming into work. If you don't believe those two, and some don't, do it for your brand. And that was the real message that resonated, I think, with a lot of businesses that are not used to global health. And what I mean is, doing good is good for your brand. And I think that encouraged a lot of businesses to come in. Now, of course, most major businesses are engaged in some issue, and HIV just being one of them.
Well, you talk about the demographic of young people and people who are paying attention to media. And one of the big kind of myths to debunk, I think, that Barbara and her team are doing such a good job with, is that health is only the concern of people who are actually in ill health or people who are older and dealing with health care more actively. How are you getting young adults to care about health, care about global health, and actually see it as a career path for themselves?
Well, I mean, I think that we're operating in a time when young adults already care. When we started Global Health Corps, it was in the year 2009, and so many people were rethinking what their career path could be. And as were many, obviously, recent college graduates were totally rethinking what they could be doing with their life. And so for us, probably starting a nonprofit in 2009 was not that easy. It was a time when we could take advantage of these broader discussions about how your career could impact other people's lives. And that's been a huge, it's actually not hard for us to get people interested in Global Health Corps. We accept 2% of our applicants. We're adding 100 fellows in July, and 4,000 people applied for those positions. And they're all under 30, and many of them have careers in the private sector, and they have very relevant skill sets to global health, like supply chain management, tech, education, communications. But they just otherwise didn't see how those skills fit in. They were under the assumption that you had to be a doctor or a nurse to affect change in global health. And so I think a big part of our job is to highlight how those skills are necessary. 8 of our fellows are architects, and they're working in Rwanda with Partners in Health and the Ministry of Health there, and they are redesigning health centers, changing the way that air flows throughout so that TB and other airborne illnesses don't affect people that walk in the door of the health center. And I asked them all, would you have ever thought that you would be working in global health? And now they're actually working on healthcare policy with the Ministry of Health. And they never would have thought that, just because they didn't see how architecture could save lives. But I think we're excited thinking about when you bring those other skill sets to the table, you have new solutions that you otherwise wouldn't have gotten, and of course it does save lives.
So part of what you're also doing is helping to clarify that healthcare is a subset of health, and health
Yes.
is much bigger than that.
Yes, absolutely.
Incredibly interesting. I have three teens and a tween at home, and Barbara's asking me, well, do they know what global health is? Are they interested in it? And I said, well, they better be. But actually, I'm not sure if they really do. I think that there's something that we need to talk about with that. In fact, Dean Linda Fried, I believe, is in the room right now. She's going to be one of the key speakers at lunch, and I'm on her board at the Columbia Mailman School of Public Health, and one of the things that is being pioneered there is getting undergraduates, not just graduate students, involved in global and public health. How many of the people who are coming into your program, Barbara, are actually coming out of graduate training versus coming from business?
40% are coming from the private sector, 40% have a master's degree, and then the last 20% are just sort of amazing 22, 23-year-olds. They're all under 30. But one quick thing to note is over the past 5 years, 80 universities in the US have started formal global health programs, all driven by student interest. So I do think that there is this sort of bigger push in the education sector, which is exciting.
Yeah, it's incredible, and we'll talk more about that. Talking about making change from the inside out, Gib, the story that you started isn't that different from so many others, but you stuck with it and you turned it into something. And at a time when the economy is especially challenged in this country and around the world, and the private sector is being held more and more to very challenging, not only top line, but bottom line expectations, how do you keep and make something not only alive, but thrive inside a company that is actually designed not to make direct profits? How do you do it, Gib?
Okay, so if you do these three things, it's very easy. It's a challenge. I would say that if there was one thing that I would stress, it is the business case and being very clear about what that business case is. We said this is about an opportunity to recruit and retain and develop the best talent that we want in the business. The fact that now there's a 2.0 business case around enhancing and extending the relationship we can have with our commercial clients is a nice to have, but it's always been based on a solid business case. This wasn't about, double-sided photocopying or recycling the paper cups. This is about creating a new business model, a hybrid business model that has business bottom line benefits, but also enhances and has a symbiotic effect with the rest of the business. And what I'm really excited about is that there is a sort of growing movement around this notion of social entrepreneurship. So we all know about social enterprise and social entrepreneurship, and there's lots of great, quite small initiatives often out there doing great things. I'm passionate about the fact that can we take that spirit of entrepreneurship and sort of unlock the potential. There's people in this room who will be working in a Chevron or another large organization who have a great idea. They want to do something. I would say, make the business case and take that forward to your leadership and show how it can actually scale. Because, just one percentage change in a Chevron in a different direction, and you're doing great things already, but the power of that is worth, 1,000 small social enterprises, in my view, impact-wise.
One of the things that has come up naturally that I wanted to ask is the relationship between environment and global health, and that these two things aren't really quite as separate as we sometimes think in terms of social responsibility and development. Huma, you must be living right in the middle of that, being a healthcare professional in charge of health and medical at a company that has so many environmental challenges and goals in the center of its brand proposition. What is it like being a doctor in an oil company, and how do you make that work for everybody?
So that's an interesting question, because I know that in the beginning of my career, people used to ask, so what is a doctor doing in oil and gas industry? And it's a long story. I won't give you the whole answer here, but what people don't understand. So yes, Chevron is not a health company. We are in the business of oil and gas, but it's business imperative. It makes so much sense to invest in health because our society, our company thrives on healthy communities. And for us, productivity means healthy employees, healthy workforce, and healthy communities. So, we start our operations from, you look at, from San Francisco to sub-Saharan Africa, and we have made huge investments in operations that are hit hard by HIV/AIDS, malaria, tuberculosis. So early on, in the company, we recognized, so we did identify a business case for our company, and we recognized the link in between, making our communities healthier and then, increasing human performance, human energy, and this is how we achieved our goal. So that's one. The other thing I always say is that, sometimes, you make these big goals and you start that, this is my vision and I'm going to achieve this by so-and-so date. What worked for me was that identifying those smaller pilots. So for instance, we started small with our peer educator programs in Nigeria, and I know I have my group sitting here who's done a wonderful job in bringing that to the African countries. And then, slowly and gradually, once we thought that we had a little bit more maturity in deploying HIV/AIDS and tuberculosis malaria program, we expanded our scope, and now we're talking about non-communicable diseases. So we've gone from infectious diseases, not that our fight is over, we still have focus on infectious diseases, but we want to expand. We want to use those learnings and move into non-communicable diseases. The other thing, I always see, my career when I was a doctor, I've worked in many developing countries, and you see scarcity of resources, you see poverty, you see, lack of health infrastructure. And for a company like Chevron, you have so many resources, and you can bring those assets, you can leverage from those assets and resources, and with partnerships with the local governments, your host, you can bring it to the greater population. So I think it's been an amazing journey there.
Nancy, can I just come in on that? Because I thought it was interesting what you said there, Huma, about Chevron not, being an oil and gas company, not a healthcare company. I would slightly, it's true, of course, it's patently true, but I just think that there is such a powerful convergence going on between, within industries, but also across sectors, and that Chevron is a powerful development actor, significant development actor. You're having such impact, and businesses, if you're in these countries for 10, 20, 30 years, as you will be, you cannot be immune to crumbling hospitals or education systems. You will get involved there. And we will see that business, I think, in a post-2015 world, when we get whatever's coming after the MDGs, we will see that businesses like your own are significant development actors, can actually articulate not just their carbon footprint, but their water footprint, their poverty footprint, versus some NGOs. And to my mind, we will ultimately have something more of a kind of marketplace for outcomes. And if that happens to be Chevron or whoever else delivering these outcomes versus the UN, versus NGOs, or all together, I'm pretty agnostic. I just care about the outcomes. And I think we can't no longer define ourselves in narrow bands, because the silos really are converging.
Given that we don't have a lot of time, and there are so many things I want to ask, I promised the team that I would ask them at least one question they weren't prepared for. So I think now's the time to do that, and each will get a different one. So don't think you can prepare. All right. So I think we'll since you're laughing the most, I'll let Barbara go first. So Barbara, you have had access. You come from a well-known and very well-connected and accomplished family. How did you make the decision to use that access rather than kind of shun the spotlight? And how have you leveraged that? And what does that say to other people who actually are in positions of prominence that they grew up in?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I shunned that access for the majority of my life, but I will say the reason that I got involved in global health issues was through exposure. I was very lucky, Jean Falk. I was very lucky to be in college when PEPFAR was being launched, and I got to travel with my parents for the launch of PEPFAR to Uganda, Nigeria, and 6 countries in Africa. And at that time, I was 20 and trying to decide what I wanted to do with my career, and I remember that the overwhelming feeling of literally having thousands of people waiting in the street for access to drugs that otherwise they couldn't afford. And through that exposure, I became pretty quickly obsessed with global health issues and thinking about how can you create effective programs. And that is how I got involved. You know, and I think anyone in this room got involved via exposure and seeing injustices and wanting to do something about them. So that is how I got involved. And, you know, I never intended to start a nonprofit. If you had told me when I was younger that I was going to, I probably would have laughed in your face. But I ended up meeting my co-founders, 2 guys that were at Google and 2 guys that were working at an organization called Face AIDS via Peter Piot, who is also one of my mentors, and he connected us. And we assumed that an organization like Global Health Corps existed, and we were going to brainstorm and support that organization, and because we saw the value in investing in young leaders now so that they can be sort of game changers throughout their lives on global health issues. So we started doing heavy research, and we looked everywhere for this organization, and we met with anyone that would meet with us. And turns out this organization didn't exist. And so we ended up starting Global Health Corps, but it was very much based on advice from our mentors like Peter Piot and Mark Dybel and Paul Farmer and people that were much more experienced in global health that helped guide us in our thinking.
Well, that's a beautiful thing to hear, and I guess it leads me to ask Bill 2 questions. One you can do just short, which is, now that you've gotten to this stage in your life, what do you try to do as a mentor? I know that I think about that a lot when people look up to me and say, well, you know more than I do. Well, what do you do with that? Because it's a huge responsibility. But I'd also like you to talk about the issue of being an American who lives mostly in America but can do global good. Because there's another myth, I believe, that's out there, which is if you haven't lived in 100 countries, then, and you have an American accent, then it can be hard to actually be a global leader. And that's clearly not the case. So please touch base on mentoring, for advice for all of us who have to be mentors, as well as being somebody who's based in the US but is engaged on a global level.
Well, by the way, you did bring up that I have retired. You know, I'll name drop. We like to name drop at MTV. And Bill Clinton told me once when I said I was going to retire, he said, "Oh, great news. Now you can finally say anything you want." And then he paused and said, "But no one really cares what you're going to say." So mentorship is a good way to solve that problem. And I think the most important thing about mentorship is, you know, we're all so busy. But young people, and pick up on Barbara's point, you know, there's been a sea change. At MTV, we layer the generations and study X, Y, millennials, et cetera. There has never been more engagement from young people than today. There's never, it's really quite remarkable and inspirational. So mentoring is important because, you know, the older ones still have something to give. And I would just encourage everyone, the most important thing is give your time, which is the most precious thing we all have. And particularly for the people that come to you. And I have so many people that come to me, and, you know, we exchange business cards, and it's really hard, really hard. But just a little bit of your time can make a big difference, because that person could end up being, who knows, you know, certainly a community leader or minister of health or whatever. And young people, getting to your second question, outside the U.S. I'm actually still based outside the U.S. I have a home here, but I still live in London. I've lived the majority of my life outside the U.S. So sorry to say this, I don't really see myself as only an American. As many of us do, I see myself as more international. My wife is German, the kids have multiple passports, et cetera, et cetera. So I still spend quite a bit of time traveling, Africa, of course, and, you know, I like to say, you can't go to Africa without being changed. And you have seen this remarkable transition to Africa. You know, old Africa, corruption, disease, war, new Africa, GDP growth in the middle class, it's higher, accelerating higher than any other region in the world, entrepreneurship, getting their act together on health. So the new Africa is very, very inspiring. But to spend time there is so, so important. So I do see your point where you don't have to actually be there to make a difference, which is true, absolutely true. But I'm a big believer in going there. And feet on the soil makes so much difference. And as business people, we often travel and go to a conference room and hotel and back to the airport. And I've always believed the opposite. You got to just go vertical in the culture, experience it, and I think that helps you understand much better. At MTV, we had a phrase. At MTV, it was not one channel around the world. It was very much different channels, in Nickelodeon as well, and even comedy. Respect and reflect the local culture. And you can't do that you have to be there.
That's great. Well, I'm actually inspired by that, so thank you for that. Huma, you, like me, are a mom with kids who are home and watching what you do, inspired what you do, but also wanting to know why you're not home more. Tell us about the personal side of this and how you handle it, so that you can continue to do the great work that you do and have it work for you and your family in your personal life as well as your professional and public life.
So I think the first thing I would say, FaceTime is really great. It works when you have kids at home and you can say hello to them. So
Do you mean real FaceTime or
on your iPhone,
Virtual FaceTime.
virtual FaceTime. Virtual
Not in person,
FaceTime.
okay.
And I actually believe in quality time. So one thing is that being a mother and being a woman actually has made me understand a lot about the needs of women in healthcare. And like I mentioned, when I travel abroad, I've been to Africa, I've been to Asia, and over there you see that it's not just about prevention of HIV/AIDS or tuberculosis and malaria. It's about reproductive health. It's about scarcity of health infrastructure and providing access to medicines and drugs and whatnot. Sometimes we talk about bringing people to hospitals, and you go to Bangladesh or another country where the biggest question is, how do you travel to a hospital? It's the bus or the accommodation or the transportation that's a problem. The clinic is there and the doctors are there, but then sometimes, there are no routes to, access. So anyway, one thing is that, that has given me insights. I always believe in, having a work-life balance, and, my group sitting here will testify to that I always say that, try to balance both things. So, I've worked with a company, fortunately, that has a lot of emphasis on that. Even though I travel, I try to make sure that I spend enough time with my family, and, bring your family to the events you go to. We have a great event in San Francisco, the AIDS Walk, and Chevron has been a great sponsor. And when I go to the AIDS Walk, my husband, my kids are there with me. And what happens is that it helps them understand what you're doing. They are with you in the fight, and it gives you a great speech at work, at home to talk to, and you create champions. I'm not doing what Barbara is doing at that scale, but at least I feel that I've done a good job in talking to my family and friends about the work we do and create that passion and desire.
Thank you. And we have about 10 more minutes, but I do want to ask Gib something. Having worked in organizations that are probably more like yours than some of the other ones we talked about, I am especially interested in how you deal with the naysayers. You have mentors who got what you were trying to do. Give advice to people in the room who believe that working in global health is good for the business as well as good for the world, when there are people who just don't get that. How do you deal with it?
I talk a bit about the kind of corporate immune system that's trying to kind of, it's cultures, it's naysayers, they're not always evident as well. They don't always come to you and say that's rubbish. Some do. But it's the ones that are more difficult to deal with who don't come forward. They're just, latently saying maybe this is not great for your career to somebody who maybe wants to come forward, or, talking away. I think that, besides the business case piece, I believe it's about helping them understand that that the world has changed. Okay, the people that we've been talking about, that Barbara's been talking about, the youth are wanting different things from what some of these naysayers who have had a very successful career for 3 decades, driving shareholder value. The 20-somethings don't want that. They don't necessarily want to make a fortune. They want to make a difference in their careers. I read something in the FT earlier this week, some survey about the fact 25% of new college graduates are too embarrassed to say that they're going to work in a bank. They're not going to financial institutions. Apologies for MD in the banks. I'm just wondering what about the other 75%. But anyway, they're wanting different things, and people have to understand that. That if we want to retain that kind of talent, if we want to have a company that will, have something to say to that kind of talent, then you need to change. And I, again, through evidence, bring back people who I've got. They're better, they're more engaged, they've got new skills, we're enhancing the client relationships, so even some of the naysayers can be won over, Nancy.
Anybody else want to make a comment about naysayers before we go to the audience?
I think also you just need to make it aspirational. It helps if the CEO supports it. And when I was running MTV, Georgia Arnold, who really deserves all the credit for staying alive within the MTV organization, she started out as my secretary. I always placed her right, and then she grew to be senior vice president, now executive vice president. I think she should run the whole company. But she always sat right next to me, and I think the CEO endorsement really makes a big difference. But the other thing is just to make it cool, make it cool. Condoms, one example. We worked so hard at MTV to make condoms cool, using them cooler. Gavi, make vaccines cool, make using them cooler. So it's more of an aspirational, I think, than anything else.
I think quickly I wanted to add, Nancy, one thing is that, for a health professional talking about health, there's no surprise there. But one thing that we did in our company was to create global health champions at all levels. So it's not just the medical director talking about health, and you have your executive management, your CEO talking about it, like you said, and also when you go out to the countries, you make the message country sensitive, culture sensitive, and then you attract that audience. And instead of the health champ, you're the medical director or the health professional talking about health, you have all these people at those levels talking about health. And I think that's one great success we've had in our company. And you'll see one of our executive vice president, Rhonda Zygocki, she'll probably have she has a session in the afternoon talking about health, and I think that's a great win for someone at that level in the company to be an ambassador for health.
She's great, by the way. She's on the board, Rhonda. She's wonderful.
So, well, why don't we open up the floor. We only have a few minutes, so I'm going to invite people to ask questions if you make them short so we can have a chance to have a few. Please don't be shy. Okay, Barbara, you ask a question of the audience.
That they'll answer?
Yes, that this lady will answer. Go ahead. I know you know her. Go ahead.
Working? Yes, now it is. We had the great honor to hear Paul Farmer a couple of, last week in DC, who's just so inspirational. I'd never seen him before. And he was describing some of the characteristics that he would apply when he's working in developing countries. And I just wonder, there is such a coming of worlds together, and I've done brief stints in developing countries, but I'm just wondering, what are some of the characteristics that you remember and try to apply when you are working in a culture in a country that is so different from your own, where respect and listening are so important?
For me, it was listening. It sounds cliche, but listen more than talking. And also really helps to have a local employee, which we tended to do. And as I said before, rather than just go to the conference room, just experience the culture, go out. And, MTV, went out to the nightclubs. What's not to like about that? But also go to the AIDS orphans, the hospitals, some of the downtrodden areas, and just experience that. And I think that's how you truly understand a local culture. And just on Paul Farmer, I had the privilege of spending a couple days with him in Haiti after the earthquake, and because we raised money to help build a hospital with our disaster relief show on MTV. And he's like Gandhi mixed with Mother Teresa. He's unbelievable. And I would encourage anyone, because he's open, he's in the Central Plateau, he's not in Port-au-Prince, but to see what he's done over the last 25 years is one of the most inspirational, remarkable things I've seen. And so, I know he's written a book and et cetera, but a lot of it's under the radar screen. And he's just devoted his whole life to making Haiti better. And he's really making a difference. The last thing he's done, he's built this hospital, state-of-the-art hospital, 350 beds, solar-powered, 5 operating centers, best hospital not only in Haiti, but probably in the entire Caribbean. So I really appreciate you mentioning Paul, because he's been a mentor to me as well.
For sure, inspiring. One more question? Yes. Person there. I can't even see anything, but I know somebody just raised. There you go.
Hi, I actually work for an organization called GlowMed, and we're focusing on training the next generation of global health leaders by focusing on undergraduates. And I was wondering if you could speak more to the idea of mentorship and how young people today can really access the same type of mentorship in the private sector that you found on your personal journeys.
Well, why don't you take that? Because you must be advising people on that very topic all the time.
And we get many applicants that have done GlowMed in college, so we love GlowMed. I think one thing that we've started building out quite a bit with Global Health Corps is our mentor program. Because all of our fellows are under 30 and they're close to the beginning of their careers, they can learn so much from other people. And we've been lucky to partner with many businesses on this. HP, as a company, provides employees that mentor all of our fellows, and they have super relevant skill sets like, they've been working on HP's supply chain for 30 years, and they'll mentor our fellows that are doing drug supply chain management in rural Malawi. And it's direct skills transfer, but it's also so important to have someone, when you're trying to navigate your own career, to ask questions about why they made certain decisions. And we've seen the power of just that sort of intergenerational dialogue enormously allow our fellows to jump, several steps ahead in their career because they have someone investing in them. And I think from a HP employee perspective, it's probably pretty fun to be on the phone with someone problem solving about an issue that they're dealing with in rural Malawi that they otherwise wouldn't be exposed to.
Incredible. We only have a couple of minutes left, and this has been such an illustrious panel. I guess I want to conclude by asking each person just to kind of tell us something that they want us to be thinking about after we leave the room. And I will start, because I'm talking already. I hope that we're all thinking about our paths and how we can shape them and how we can make differences inside and outside our organizations. And I welcome any of you to ask any questions or provide any comments to me after this, because we're going to be collaborating on an article on this very topic, and if there are things that we should cover, we'd love to hear from you. So why don't we start at the other end? Gib, what's your leaving thought?
The leaving thought would just be, take that first step. Just a small, decisive change or action. Might seem very, very trivial, but then the sort of provenance kicks over. I believe that you will find that there's a sort of chain reaction, whether it's finding yourselves on panels like this or speaking to other people who are like-minded or working with other companies, but you can see that there's this almost domino effect that starts with a tiny change. So don't leave it, don't put it off, don't say I've got this idea, but maybe next year, or it might be bad for my career. Just do it, and I believe it will absolutely pay dividends for you personally, but also for the causes that we're talking about this week.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Gib. And Huma?
If I can leave with one thing, I would say that, gain insights from networking and collaboration. I think we have great experience and knowledge in this room and outside of this room, and use your time here at the conference to build those relationships and gain knowledge and do more.
I suppose it would be, the world has many issues and challenges, but there's never been a better time to be alive. And just pick any one, whether it's vaccines, the power of technology has transformed society with vaccines. The magic of vaccines saves literally millions of lives. The other one is young people. Attach yourself if you're not young, or if you're, young at heart, of course, because this generation is more engaged, as I said, than any other generation I've seen, which is really inspirational. So there's huge opportunity. It's a great time to be alive, and just keep thinking positive and never, 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 ever accept no for an answer.
Barbara.
I left Bill. Well, everything he said. I do think it's a magical time to be working in global health right now, and for everyone in this room to even be interested in it. I think one thing that I love that Huma was talking about is everyone should be an ambassador for the causes that they care about within their organization or to other people. So, just think about how you can share what you're passionate about with others around you, because you can engage other allies to work with you.
It's great. Well, I'm certainly passionate about working with all of you and look forward to spending the next couple of days together. And on behalf of Huma Abbasi from Chevron and Gib Bullock from Accenture, Bill Rohde from so many places that he's leading, and Barbara Bush from Health Corps, and myself, Nancy Tourette, from the newly birthed WholeView. Thank you for your time, and have a nice rest of your day. Thank you.